Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all having an amazing day. And I am so excited to finally get to sit and film and talk to you all about something that has been on my mind for the last 24 hours. That is why I believe that you should learn how to be a brand ambassador for yourself. That is the topic of today's video. And this is something that I think you should learn early in your life and practice often. And I'm gonna give you some context. So, yesterday I went to a friend's dinner party and I met someone new. And the someone new that I met was a lovely lady, and she was a couple of years out of college and she was thinking about going to law school. So she had a lot of questions about my choices in the legal career and in the legal profession, which school I went to, what I did after graduating, and sort of the reasoning behind all these decisions. And since she was at the point where she is planning to sit for the exam and is thinking about going to law school, I'm going to focus on what we were talking about at that juncture. So we were talking about what kind of schools are the right schools to go to. And with law school, there's a very strong philosophy and sort of pervading wisdom that you should go to the best school that you get into. And it's very similar to the advice you get in high school often, at least in a lot of high schools, that you should try to go to the best college you get into. And I did that. When I was in high school, once the college bug kind of hit me, and I changed schools a lot, but the high school I went to was definitely a high school that was obsessed with college admissions. And so if any of you have been to a similar high school, you know that kind of culture. And I was not used to that, but I caught on to the culture. And probably a little late. I think I really noticed it more in my junior year, but people were planning and plotting their whole lives to figure out what kind of college they would get into. And then when they didn't get into the college that they had planned their entire life around, they completely fell apart. I had not planned my whole life around getting into a particular college. I just happened to be really into academics and achievement. And honestly, I just loved academics for academics' sake. And so I was excited about the chance to qualify to go to a great American institution, but it wasn't something that my entire life identity had centered on. And I saw so many people around me go into deep depression and deep anguish and so much agony, thinking their lives would fall apart when they didn't get into their top, school of choice. And it's like they didn't know who they were without a particular brand associated with them. So even back then, I was like, this is really odd. And I just want to say this for those of you who are watching who might be a little bit younger. Your success in life is not contingent on which school you went to. That goes for undergrad and that goes for professional schools, graduate schools. Your success in life is not contingent on which school you went to. Which school you go to will relay certain information about you, and it will not relay certain information about you. What it will tell people in the outside world, whether they're prospective employers or whether they're just people who are getting to know about you, it will tell them one very specific data fact, and that is that you found a way, given the life you were born into and the resources you had at your disposal at a particular moment in time, to figure out a path into that school. I'm going to repeat that. The information that it actually will relay is that given the life you were born into and the resources you had at your disposal at a particular moment in time, you were able to find a way into that school. Now, it may not even tell those people, those premises, what circumstances you were born into, what resources you had at your disposal, and how you found your way into that institution with those two fixed facts. It will just tell them that so-and-so person had certain circumstances and found a way to get into this institution that seems to have some rough level of standards for the kinds of people it admits. That is such a teeny tiny data point about you as an infinite person. And it is also a very teeny tiny data point that tells very little about your ability to succeed in a very defined job that has very specific requirements for certain tasks and for certain skills. So, your success in life will not depend on which school you got into. But when you're very young and you're still very insecure and you are looking for validation and you're looking for a chance to prove yourself to the world and prove yourself to yourself, we often put too much weight into that one brand. And what I want to start encouraging you all to do is not delegate your self-esteem to other brands. I want you to learn how to be a brand ambassador for yourself as early in your life as you possibly can. So I'm going to go back to the conversation that I had with this lovely friend who I just met last night but really got to liking. And this is how I explained my decision of where to go to law school. So I explained that when I went to college, I went to a fantastic institution. I had a really good time, and I probably did a little better than average, but I was not at the tippy top of my class, and nor was I at the bottom. And like I said, I was probably a little bit on the above average, or maybe I was in the average, but I think I was probably on a little bit above average, but not something spectacular. And at that part of my life, I didn't feel like I could handle corporate America over summer vacations. I tried one or two times. I tried internships in different industries, and they didn't feel right. I felt like a kid sitting in an adult world trying to act like an adult when all I really wanted to do was be exercising and teaching dance classes and laughing and traveling and meeting cousins. And that's the kind of stuff I wanted to do in my summer vacation. And frankly, I still think that teenagers and young adults shouldn't necessarily have to go and work in adult workplaces just to puff up their resume. I think that life is worth living, and this channel is so that I help teach you all how to live life. But a lot of people did that. And so what happens culturally is that the more and more people who do one thing in order to get an edge, that sort of edge thing starts becoming the norm, and it sets the bar a little higher. So now everyone around me is spending every summer of their undergrad working at banks and working in corporate, rotations and things like that. And I tried once or twice, I got some, and I didn't enjoy them, and I don't even know if I finished them. And my mom at the time had actually left our home state and moved to another state. And so I wasn't seeing her as often, and I wanted to see her, and I wanted to see where she was living. So I spent my summers with my mom where she was living. And they didn't have those kind of fancy corporate internships for college students. And so when I graduated undergrad, despite having above average grades and having done, I think I did do one semester long internship in corporate America, I did not have big companies clamoring to hire me. And I remembered thinking a couple things. One was that maybe I had gotten complacent when I was at undergrad, because instead of pushing myself and testing myself and seeing what my full potential was, I kind of at the back of my head knew that I was going to be coming out of this really reputable institution, and kind of thought that the institution and its name would do a lot of the legwork for me. And when I graduated, that really wasn't the case. I think people will always be, again, a little bit impressed with a reputable institution on my resume, because again, they'll have that conclusion, that kind of baseline conclusion of she must have been smart because she got into such and such school. Even though, again, like I told you, the real data point that it relays is that given the circumstances I was born into and the resources I had available to me at a particular time in my life, I figured out a way how to get into this school. And so that context is very important, I always think. But yeah, people would have that immediate conclusion, but really they have no idea, just based on the fact that I got into that school, what I'm good at, what I enjoy, what comes naturally to me, what am I actually pushing really hard, kind of against my natural instinct to do well, and how do I work? How do I interact with people? What's my personality like? What's my energy like? What's my work ethic like? What's my creativity like? What's my human empathy like? All these things that you have no idea. You know nothing about that just based on the school I went into. So I found myself trying to get jobs and finding that I didn't feel like I had any particular skills to market. I didn't have any particular defined sense of interest or purpose. And all I had was this brand name on my resume. And there was nothing that I could tell employers that was compelling about what I had to offer them and how what they had to offer me fit into like a broader vision of my life. And I think when you don't actually have that, like when you haven't done the work and figured that out internally, it's really hard to fake it. And I think that's why I tend to do quite well in interviews, and definitely have in the last couple of years done exceptionally well. I think it's because I do a lot of that thinking now on the front end. And I'm a lot more thoughtful with what I actually want and what I can actually offer and what a place can actually offer me before I go into that interview cycle, and everything feels very organic and naturally cohesive. So I didn't know what to do. And what a lot of my school friends did is they just relied on brands and brands and brands and brands. It was like this brand name school and this brand name, Big Four, and then, their brand name high school. And it was all about who knows who. And those are other people who are brands that are, connections at certain companies. And so you start living this very associative life. You're trying to be associated maybe with a partner at some big bank or some consulting company or some law firm. And you're always trying to have other people assume that you have a certain set of skills or talent based on your association with either certain institutional brands or certain human brands. And you never learn how to just become an ambassador for yourself and how to cultivate your own skills and your own talents and then market those to the world. When it came time for me to go to law school, I did fairly well on the admissions test. I did not score at the tippy top. I did not score at the bottom or even on the average. I was a little bit above average. See a common theme here. And I did well enough to get into a number of schools and a couple of pretty coveted schools, but not all the coveted schools. I was not, admitted to every single one of the top 20 schools, nothing like that. But I managed to squeak a few offers from some really good schools. Then I had a bunch that were sort of in the middle and a couple more that were maybe the less competitive batch of schools. And they were spread out across the country. At that time, my mom was like, apply across the United States. I think I applied to 30 schools across the United States. But I knew which market I wanted to start my legal career in. And even though I didn't know what type of law I wanted to practice, I didn't know the difference between a litigator and a corporate lawyer. I didn't know the difference between the federal system and the state system and civil law and criminal law and all these things. I knew what market I wanted to practice in. And based on that, my mother told me, go to a lower ranked school in the market that you want to practice in. And if you get a school that gives you some money, take the money and use your natural skills, which are human skills like networking. And you are probably going to get farther than if you go to the best brand name school and it's far away from the market you want to be in, and you're going to be trying to crawl your way back to the market you want to be in. So that was her advice to me. And at the time I thought about it, and I remember there were some pieces of me that really just wanted to go to the best brand name school that I got into. But those schools offered me no money. And I remember that in undergrad, I didn't really come out at the tippy top of my class. And I was like, well, what if that happens again in law school? I have no way of really knowing how I'm going to do once I'm inside a program with everyone who was probably getting similar test scores to me. And what if I'm like in the middle of the pack or at the bottom of the pack? And then I've taken out all this money. And what if all those companies are not clamoring to hire me? And now I have all this debt. And I said, I don't even think a brand name school is going to be able to save me from that situation, because the brand name school was not able to save me when it happened in my undergrad. And so I said, you know what? I think I need to take a chance on myself. And I need to go to a school where I don't think the school has much brand value. And that is going to force me to step into my own and learn skills, learn actual skills that I can go into an interview and talk about and explain why I have them and how I got them and how they'll be useful. And the more I thought about it, the more I just felt that going to law school, I didn't even want the cushion of a brand name institution. I wanted to take a gamble on myself and force myself to become my own brand ambassador. This was such a powerful, powerful thing that I decided to do at that time. And it's frankly something I'm trying to remember now, because I did that for a few years. In law school, I really became someone who depended on myself. I came up with the skills I wanted. I found ways to get them. I found ways to talk about them, and I got amazing opportunities. And I never took out any student loans for my tuition. I did take out some loans for my living. We can talk about that in another video if you guys are interested in finances. But I ended up getting these really amazing jobs. And the strange thing is, I think for a while, I kind of got reabsorbed into the brand culture, because once you start doing coveted things, certain doors start to open, and then certain doors seem reachable, and they all have these like associations, and you start to really enjoy when people associate you with certain qualities because of the brands you're associated with, when you don't have to do the work. Like, it just starts to feel like a shortcut to validation and self-esteem, and we all are yearning for it. Like, we all want this validation. We all want this self-esteem, especially if you're like the child of immigrants or really like brought yourselves up from your own bootstraps in life. Like, you're always yearning for validation, and getting certain brands to do the work for you is it's like so nice. It makes your life easier. But I'll tell you something, it makes you complacent. It makes you complacent, just like it made me complacent in undergrad, because you really should always want to be your own brand ambassador. And I think I've realized it's the same thing I feel with food and with fashion. Like, when you think you're fashionable, but all you really are doing is carrying around items that come from like luxury brands, you're not really telling the world a story about yourself that you are curating with art and creation. You're not saying a story about your mood or your taste when you are just getting a designer item. Sometimes you can if you get something that really speaks to you and has a reason that it speaks to you, but oftentimes you're really telling the world a very narrow story, right? You're just telling the world that you were able to purchase that brand. And maybe from that, they will assume that you are put together or poised or rich or classy. Same thing with schools, right? They might think you're smart, hardworking, when really the only data point is that you figured out a way to get into that institution. So oftentimes we rely on brands, whether it's fashion brands or like the town that you choose to live in based on its, the zip code and property tax and cachet, or the institutions you're working at. You're picking things, the car, you're picking these brands because you want the brands to tell a story about you to the world, instead of doing the work to tell a story to the world yourself about who you are. And I think the best way to do that is to actually not depend on any brand at all. When you're someone who has a really clear sense of your personality, and you know how to have your garments tell a story about your personality, you're gonna know how to do that, whether you have an entire super fancy mall available to you, or you have a thrift store available to you, because you're going to know how to pick the things that speak to you and that say something about who you are. And you're going to look like you when you put an outfit together, whether it's from that fancy luxury mall or it's from that thrift store, because you have a strong sense of self and you know how to express that sense of self. I think it's the exact same thing with schools and with education and with your professional life. When you have a strong sense of what you offer, what you enjoy, what your purpose is, what you want to contribute to the world, you are going to find a way to showcase those talents, those skills, those things that make you who you are, whether you are coming out of a community college, coming out of a foreign graduate institution, or coming out of an esteemed American institution. And you're going to find a way, whether you are working at a small firm, a medium firm, a large firm, East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, South, like when you have a strong sense of your capacity and your talents and your skills, you will become a brand ambassador for yourself. And you will use whatever things, whatever resources are at your disposal as accessories, and just like you're just going to use them as an easel, to showcase who you are. You should think of all these things that are available as just things that are in the toolbox that you can use to show the world who you are and what you have to offer. But don't let these brands try to do the work of telling the story of who you are to the world for you. They can't do it. They can barely tell a story of who they are to the world. And so you are so much more like infinitely nuanced and human and interesting than an institution that has never breathed a day of its life and that was designed by other people for a different purpose than what a human being's purpose is. Don't try to have brands tell your story for you. Figure out who you are, and then think of everything that exists in the world around you as a tool that you can help pick up, or like a paintbrush that you can pick up to help paint the story of who you are. So that's my lesson that I learned by going to a not super fancy law school, although I will say my law school was wonderful. I had a really enjoyable experience. I made friends that I loved. I met amazing teachers. I did all the things you would want to do in a rich legal educational environment. And I'm not saying this to put my law school down. I'm saying it though because it wasn't one of the fanciest or highest ranked schools. It wasn't not in that league. And yet it truly taught me how to be a brand ambassador for myself. And I went so much further once I learned that that was going to be my job in my life and the key to my success, and that I should never depend on any other brand to do that work for me, and that would only handicap me. So I hope you all take away this message and realize you have infinite capacities. You have to think about what you actually like, what you want to do with your life, what you want to contribute to society, and then figure out what specific skills you need to learn, at least start to learn, to show that those are the things that you are good at and can be good at, and then learn how to tell that story. And once that stuff is really true and it's coming from your heart, that's not going to be a hard story to say. You're going to be able to tell that story with so much conviction, and you're going to start getting the jobs you didn't think you would be able to get, because that truth is so undeniable. And it's such a better way of persuading people than just flashing a degree from a particular institution. So that's my lesson for today. I'm not trying to hate on reputable institutions here. The point of my message is just to remember that an institution is just a tool, but the goal should always be to figure out how to use those tools to tell the world a story about yourself from your heart. All right, I know this was a long one. Thank you so much for bearing with me as the sun set, but it was so nice to finally finish this video after a long day of trying and failing and trying and failing. So I hope you realize how much this topic meant to me, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.